Welcome, everyone. My name is Bryant Eastham, and welcome to this breakout session on protecting payment data in the contact center. I work for NICE inContact. Our company has quite a long history with regulatory compliance, and we were actually the first cloud-native contact center to achieve FedRAMP compliance in the United States. That's the major compliance initiative for the U.S. federal government. And also we work with a variety of different compliance initiatives throughout the world. Helping our customers achieve their own compliance requirements is a key part of what we do. And so hopefully we can help people through this session. And let me just get to where my slides are moving. Okay, there we go. So we've interacted with literally hundreds of different companies, and so we know how the security conversation usually goes. Most companies understand that they've got compliance or regulatory issues that they need to meet. Many of them are a little bit unsure about what exactly they need to do. And sometimes this can be difficult, even where you've got dedicated people that focus on this full time. Compliance requirements are usually changing. PCI is undergoing a major revamp even right now for later this year. And we get it. We understand that compliance is maybe not top of mind. Just like us, your primary goal is providing fantastic customer experiences for your consumers. So, in a way, compliance and compliance failures are a little bit like an earthquake. If it's small, you can usually pass through it unscathed. What we want to prevent are the large earthquakes, the ones that cause your enterprise to come tumbling down. And so this is going to start with understanding what we can do to either prevent, and can't prevent an earthquake, but prevent a security issue from arising in the first place. So I want to start, and obviously we're talking a little bit specifically about payments, but I want to broaden the vision just a little bit. If you're not familiar with all of the terms on this slide, then you probably should be with at least some of them. Depending on your business, many, if not most, of these different areas of compliance will apply to you. Whether you're dealing with just financial information, or whether you're dealing with personal health information or protected health information, government data in a variety of different areas, or other financial information, not just credit cards, but maybe banking information. At the very least, you're likely dealing with privacy information or personally protected information. And so some of the privacy regulations like GDPR are going to apply to you. And in 25 or 30 minutes, we don't have time to go over all of these. I am going to focus on some of the PCI specific concerns, but then we'll use some examples to broaden that into other areas as well. So I want to talk a little bit about customer expectations. Our consumers, our customers, their expectation is that they want a frictionless transaction. Trust me, I am who I say I am, and yes, do what I'm telling you to do. The reality can be very different, and a lot of times this is just common sense, but other times it's regulations. And so our answer at some point has to be, sorry, I can't do that. I'll give you an example, and this is something that just happened to me yesterday. I was rooting around cleaning some things up, and I found a gift card. Never happened to any of you, I'm sure. And I wondered, it's like, well, is it still valid? How much money is still on this gift card? Of course, there was a phone number on the back of the card. Gave that a call. Went through their bot. Their bot wasn't able to help me. got transferred to an agent. The agent was helpful, but at the end said, wait 30 minutes and then visit our website. I visited the website, walked through that process. That required that I create an account, and to do that, I had to verify my email address. At the end of the day, it was a pretty painful process. Now, I'm sure that that company didn't start off saying, I want this to be complicated. That wasn't their goal. And so we obviously are in this balancing act of how can we make it as easy as possible and still maintain our compliance. There are some things that I think everyone can agree on, and they're listed here. Our customers, your customers, want to view you as a trusted partner, and they believe that all of these security issues, they're really not their responsibility. When I called that company, all I wanted to know was what the balance on my gift card was. A relatively simple ask. All of that verification and everything else that they had to do, it really wasn't my responsibility. And at the end, as a trusted partner, they're expecting you to do the right thing. And by doing the right thing, that means understanding what the right thing is. So I've got a little quiz here. We'll just do this each individually, but here's the question. Does working with a compliant vendor, let's say a software as a service vendor, automatically make you compliant? Well, the answer is no. And hopefully that makes sense. Compliance is a holistic requirement. And while the vendor can do certain things, and we'll talk about that, the fact that they are doing those things doesn't automatically mean that you are compliant. It's up to you to meet the requirements that you have, and potentially to be performing your own audits and even using an external auditor on your own in order to assure your own compliance. And so this is really one of the key takeaways from this session, is understanding where the responsibility lies for different areas of compliance. So making this a little bit more concrete, compliance is always going to end up being a shared responsibility. I'm now speaking from the context of our software as a service offering, CX1, and we, of course, provide services to thousands of contact centers. There are things that are entirely our responsibility. I'll give you an example. It is entirely up to us to maintain our firewalls, to maintain our network security and partitioning, to ensure that communication is encrypted and that storage is encrypted. There is nothing that our customers can do to change how we handle that aspect of compliance. Ultimately, we are going to provide application features, and those features are then going to be used by the contact center or misused, and we'll talk about that. And then on top of all of that, we are going to audit. And so we do internal audits. We also do numerous external audits. In fact, it's probably rare that there is a time during the year that there isn't an audit of some sort going on. So we can only go so far. And there are responsibilities which are always going to be entirely on your plate. I've listed a couple of them here, and we're going to go over some examples. But ultimately, it's up to you to determine first the compliance that you need, to identify what kind of consumer data you're going to be dealing with, to establish your policies and procedures around protecting that data. Ultimately, to pick appropriate partners that can help you with those responsibilities, and then to correctly leverage the different application or product features that they provide to you. And finally, you may have your own audits. We'll talk about that a little bit, but even if you're not required to audit, it's always a very good idea. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples. So I've listed here some of the details. I understand that not all of you may be experts on every requirement of PCI DSS. So I've just picked a couple of kind of high-level examples. But here's one or three specifically around passwords. PCI really cares about passwords. And so you'll see that they require a length of at least 7 characters, that the password has to be numeric and alphabetic. And then beyond that, that users have to change their password every 90 days, and that you can't allow any of the previous 4 passwords to be used again. So those are the technical requirements that are part of PCI. You'll see on the bottom part there, this is a snapshot of part of the CX1 product. This is where we allow customers to set appropriate password policies. And so you'll see there that I've ticked off require lowercase, require uppercase, require numeric. So that meets the requirement or part of 8.2.3. You'll see I've set a password length of at least 7, so I'm safe there. And then that I've enabled 2 other options, enable password age and enable password history. Now, our responsibility in providing the software is to make sure that we provide the required functionality. And you'll see we've done that. But your responsibility is then to correctly use it. So as an example, if someone in a contact center went in and set the password length to 3, now we wouldn't even allow that. I think we have a minimum of 6. But if they were, then they would not be compliant with PCI. And we can't necessarily force them to set that correctly. The same would be true for password age or password history. If they turned those options off, then they would no longer pass an audit. Another example, I didn't look up the specific requirements. This is part of one of the PCI guidance documents. It says card information is never sent over an unencrypted end user messaging system. And then it says restrict access to card information, don't store if not needed. So here we're starting to talk a little bit about omnichannel. So people understand you're on a phone call, you've got different options there. But what if it's a chat? What if it is some other kind of end user messaging system? Well, let's talk about chat. It's one of the core channels that we support. So there are a number of things that we have to do. They're part of our platform, and that includes end-to-end encryption. So the consumer or the customer and the agent leg both encrypted during the chat session. All of the internal flows of that chat information are also encrypted. And because we audit our entire environment for PCI, that includes our databases. And so if you have a chat transcript, we're going to ensure that that chat transcript is encrypted at rest. Now, I put a little bit of an asterisk there because part of the PCI requirement is to restrict access to that information and not to store it if it's not needed. And so while everything there on the left we can do, there's also functionality that you can use. And this would apply to many of the omnichannel experiences. In this case, we've got a scripting action during our IVR sessions where you can actually turn on and off that chat transcript. And so if you know during a particular part of the transaction that you are going to be dealing with that kind of sensitive information, then you can tell our system, I want you to stop or pause collecting that information. And then you can start it back up again when it's appropriate. So again, even if you didn't do that, in a way you're covered because we've handled the encryption at rest. But if you're going to follow the spirit of the law, and if you don't have a need to have that information recorded, then we provide you the feature where you're going to do it on your own. And you'll find that that applies to many of these kinds of new digital transactions, whether it is email or SMS, chat, or even some of these other things like Facebook or different digital channels that you may have access to. Some of those you may find are just not appropriate for PCI kinds of information. But in examples where they are, at least here, you've got the end-to-end encryption and the ability to not store that information. I'll go on to another example here. So again, I've listed some of the PCI requirements. So you'll see limit access to data based on job requirements. And related to that, they talk about defining roles, and they actually call out using something called least privilege. I want to talk about this a little bit more because as we kind of are in this brave new world of employees working from home, this is one of the areas that becomes, in some ways, increasingly important. The idea behind all of these is that users should not be able to do more than they absolutely need to be able to do. That's the concept behind least privilege. I'll give an example. If I'm an agent and my day-to-day work is dealing with interactions, I would not typically need to create user accounts or manage passwords or anything else really with other users. But I would potentially be able to review call recordings or interactions that I took place in. If I flip that over to, say, someone in the HR department or a manager, it's almost the opposite. I would expect them, as part of their job requirements, to be creating and deleting users, to be managing different information about users in the organization. I would probably not be expecting them to listen to any call recordings or look at chat transcripts or anything like that. So the idea here is to, one, identify the role that a person has in the organization, and then be able to tailor or customize what they can do to the bare minimum. Now, how does that maybe tie into people working from home? Well, one of the aspects of working from home is you tend not to have people looking over your shoulder, at least not coworkers. And so a number of behaviors that you may not be doing in the office, like just using the system and kind of randomly looking to see what you can access, you don't have that same social pressure that you would in the office not to do those things. And so people may tend to explore their capabilities a little bit more at home than they would when working in the office. If you're not following principles like least privilege, then they could fairly easily find aspects of the system or find capabilities that they really shouldn't have. And so one of the kind of basic things that you can do for the work at home people is ensure that they can only do things that are really part of their job responsibilities. So I want to transition a little bit and go beyond PCI. So privacy of financial information is obviously critical. I mean, if you've got a breach or if you violate PCI sufficiently to where the card agencies are going to say you can no longer process credit cards, that is obviously a huge impact. But there are other impacts or other issues that you could run into. I want to talk a little bit about privacy. I mentioned GDPR earlier in the presentation, but it's getting to be increasingly difficult to find any country, and even in the US, many states, that are not introducing different privacy regulations. So protecting personal information, apart from financial information, is becoming increasingly critical. And failures in this area can also have fairly severe impacts on your business. One is fines. So GDPR, kind of the mother of all fines, for egregious violations, and I don't know that anybody has hit that level so far. There have been some fines, but the max is 10 million euros or 2% of your global yearly turnover, whichever is greater. So fairly significant exposure with GDPR. But even here in the United States, California, the CCPA, allows for $2,500 per violation, $7,500 for each intentional violation. Obviously not something that is inconsequential. Almost more severe can be the impact to reputation. Again, depending on your company, whether you're primarily dealing with end users and they know your name, or whether you are kind of an intermediary and you're dealing with just reputation among peers, nobody wants the headline of a breach. I'll give an example. This is not from inContact, a previous global large company that I worked for. A news story broke. There had been a hack against a particular device, and I'd say within 10 minutes, this organization had brought on their incident response team. I was part of that team and dealt with some of the questions going back and forth, and this team went all the way up to very upper management, all really asking, okay, well, did we have anything to do with this breach? It was unclear based on the initial reports even what company was involved. Luckily, it was proven later that it had nothing to do with our product. It was actually a competitor. And so what could have been a very bad experience actually turned into somewhat of a good experience because we got to watch them get all of the negative press. But those can be significant impacts to your bottom line. And so we encourage people to look beyond just the immediate requirements that they may think they have and look at the broader picture and what impact a particular security breach of any sort might have on them. So I want to kind of start to wrap things up here, where to go. So we talked earlier about the kind of awkward conversation. Hopefully, at least we've talked about some ways to make that a little bit less awkward. I think it starts with having the conversation and then asking the right questions. And this includes both internal to your organization, but also external with your suppliers, particularly with your SaaS providers. That is going to start with understanding exactly what your requirements are and then having a realistic idea of what is your responsibility and what is that service provider's responsibility. Part of this, particularly on the internal side, is ensuring that across your organization, you've addressed any cultural issues so that these kinds of security problems can be much more openly discussed. If it's viewed as too much of a negative thing, then people are not, or they're going to be hesitant to raise the issues. And in almost all cases, you want those issues raised. And I guarantee that people in your organization are probably aware of things. So when those issues are raised, obviously we don't want to gloss over those. And if it means understanding better how to leverage product functionality to improve, to meet those requirements, that's a fantastic next step. I know that as part of our organization, we have not only specific help, but we also have professional services organizations that can help with really understanding how an organization can maintain their compliance built on the features that our product provides. Another very important issue is training. Training your people, training them again and again and again. I'll give another example. This is from our company, and in fact, happened just 2 days ago. I was not directly involved until later, but there was an internal chat group just with internal employees, and somebody on that chat group had actually posted an executable saying, hey, everybody should update to this version of this software. And the good news is that based on the training that all of our employees had undergone, that issue, which could have been a relatively severe incident, was entirely self-corrected. The people on the chat group immediately called out and said, hey, that's not appropriate. Delete the executable now. Nobody execute that. Don't run it. And it was only after the issue had essentially been resolved that any of the normal security people got involved. So that was entirely based on training. I know we undergo many hours of security training every year for every employee across the organization, and even more if your role is specifically around security. So training is a fantastic first line of defense. And then to back all of this up is your audits. Now, if you're required to do external audits, then you know that they can be somewhat painful. But even if you're not required to do audits, I would encourage you to do internal audits. And that can be at whatever level your organization is comfortable operating at, even if it's just having an understanding of what industry best practice is, and then having those open discussions about, are we meeting these expectations or not? Or whether you want to dedicate specific people and time to do more official internal audits. They will help to ensure that everything is happening the way that often management assumes that it's happening, but may not when the rubber meets the road. So with that, I think we've got a little bit of time for some Q&A. I haven't been watching the Q&A screen, but I think somebody has been maybe answering questions during the presentation, but happy to transition and answer any questions now. And thank you for participating. I don't see any questions yet. Okay. Well, I think that we're actually right at the ending time. So again, I thank you for your participation. I hope that this has been beneficial to you, and good luck with the rest of the conference.